Okay, I'm rolling. This is just going to be audio too. It's just going to air on our radio tonight. So here we go in 3, 2, 1. And we're back to wrap things up on this edition of NFL Live KC on your home for the National Football League in Kansas City, Sports Radio 810 WHB. And we are happy to be joined now by one of the biggest personalities when it comes to sports in the Baltimore area, Nestor Aparicio. Nestor, thanks for joining us. How are you, man?
I brought my leg lamb from Cleveland, man. I mean, we keep it all in conference, all in division around here. But we're chasing you, man. You guys had the parade, and then the virus hit, and, now we're all just trying to get on the field a couple weeks, right?
Hey, so we're just doing audio here, but I'm doing a Zoom conference with Nestor, and that leg lamp is right next to the window as it's supposed to be. Fragile, classy.
I can make it red if you need me to. It's regular now.
It looks good. Hey, so what is going on with this Earl Thomas situation in Baltimore? Look, the Kansas City Chiefs thought they had traded for Earl Thomas a couple of years ago, right before he suffered that season-ending injury when we saw him get carted off the field, flipping the fans off and all that in Seattle. And Chiefs fans thought he might have been the thing keeping them from going to the Super Bowl that year. They end up getting Tyrann Mathieu a little bit later. Earl Thomas goes to Baltimore. He's a great player. But now we see this whole situation with the fight. How surprised were you at the way this thing played out with Earl Thomas in Baltimore?
I don't want to pretend that I'm some, expert on Earl Thomas. He came in from Seattle last year. I was at all the games in the locker room. There was an incident with Brandon Williams, decorated defensive lineman from the Ravens, and a well-liked guy as well in the locker room. There was a post-game flare-up and some things that players were talking about in the locker room. And Earl was one of those guys that didn't fit in right away. And mainly because he's a 30-something-year-old guy, and a lot of these guys are very young. Mark Ingram really took to the offensive room and became a leader over there. Earl Thomas came into that room where other people had been, and he's kind of signed under duress. I mean, C.J. Mosley was signed by the Jets. The Ravens were a little bit shocked by that in the middle of the night, the first day of the signing period about a year and a half ago, March of last year, March of 19. And, within hours, Earl Thomas was signed without having made a visit, without having come to the building, without having a sit down and let's get to know each other over a steak or a glass of wine, or what are you about, what are we about? It was more like 4 years, $55 million, and they brought him in. And I don't want to say he didn't fit in. I mean, the team went 4 months without losing last year, right? Didn't make it far enough to play you guys in January, but we were on the road to doing all that. And, I've never covered a team where week after week they're going out to L.A. and winning 45-6, and Lamar is story 1, story 2, and story 3. Wasn't a whole lot of oxygen for much of anything else about problems that they may have had last year. When you're 14-2, you don't have any problems, right? Until the Titans come in and beat you, after sitting at home for a week. And then all the questions get asked. But clearly Earl Thomas had an off-season incident where his wife held a gun on him. And I don't think the Ravens thought that was real cool. And then this fight that happened on Friday was between not just teammates, right? I mean, Nate, you've been out to these practices. It can get hot. It can get chippy. Guys are playing for jobs. Guys are trying to stay healthy. If there's a perception that you're trying to hurt me or going a little too hard or whatever it would be, that's when these tempers flare, right? This was two guys on the same side of the ball. These were the two safeties that the Ravens expect to line up with. And Chuck Clark is a guy that is a league minimum guy. He was a 6th-round draft pick. He's a guy that knows the playbook so well that last year when the injury happened and someone had to wear the green dot, they gave it to him. So Chuck Clark is the bookworm. He's the student of the defense. He's the guy that always knows where alignment, assignment, technique, where people were supposed to be. And this brouhaha happened on the field on Friday in Owings Mills, and Earl Thomas is gone on Saturday. There's a leadership council that John Harbaugh keeps with his team, and apparently the leadership council came in and said, we don't want him here. And that should speak volumes when, you're thrown off the boat by your teammates, kind of, sort of.
Yeah, and I think it speaks volumes when it happens on a team that is so well respected like the Ravens, that year in and year out seems to have good leadership from the coaching staff and in the locker room. It's one thing if you go to a team that's a mess and you don't fit in, It's another thing if you go to a team, like you said, that went 14-2 and looks to be back and ready for more, and those guys don't want you around. So let's move on to that topic you mentioned about where there is the oxygen, Lamar Jackson. Look, I don't know. Patrick Mahomes broke the Madden curse, so maybe that's not an issue going into this year. A lot of us keep wondering if you can run the ball as often as he does and keep going for long enough. And I guess the other question is, then can he win in the playoffs? Where do you come down on those situations? Are you expecting him to dominate again this year the way that he did last year and then take it into the playoffs?
Well, I think everybody's trying to game plan around him, right? And obviously the Ravens in drafting Dobbin, they want to have more weapons. They want to be even more multiple, dealing Hayden Hurst, who was their first-round draft pick, the guy they picked ahead of Lamar. They dealt him off to Atlanta in the offseason because they felt like they may have had enough tight ends, and they wanted to give him an opportunity. Second year for Hollywood Brown, who's picked up 25 pounds of muscle, and he was just such a little guy last year.
Mm-hmm.
And they're full of young talent. Now, they lost Marshall Yanda. That's going to do something to the offense. And you don't just plug and play Hall of Famers, especially in the case of Marshall Yanda, who, when they decided to start to run the football, nobody had more fun than Marshall Yanda last year. And he wound up retiring. He'll go to the Hall of Fame probably. And he's already lost all that weight and that some of the football players have a hard time with. But the offense itself comes back without Marshall Yanda mainly intact, and probably being able to build even more off the playbook they did last year with Greg Roman and the things that they want to do and the way that they wanted to have Lamar throw the football to some degree. I mean, let's be honest, man. They were up 20 and 30 points in the second and third quarter of a lot of football games last year, to the point where you're not going to throw the football, even if you can throw the football, even if you want to throw the football, you weren't going to do that. And how defenses are going to come at this team, and then how that punch-counter-punch is going to work with what Greg Roman is going to try to cook up this year. Keeping him healthy is obviously job number one. Making sure he doesn't take an awkward hit. You know all about that in Kansas City.
Yep.
When Pat Mahomes goes down, you're not going to win a world championship. Same thing here with Lamar Jackson. And then you add in COVID, right? On top of all the rest of this. And it's a messy beginning of the season, I think, for everyone. And certainly in Kansas City and in Baltimore, our two cities, there's more hope than anywhere else because we really feel like we have the best teams, right?
No doubt about it. I think, I don't know how you feel, but I think the COVID situation actually benefits teams like Baltimore and Kansas City even more because they don't have as many new things to implement. They won't miss the OTAs and the mini camps and the preseason games as much as other teams because so much is already kind of plug and play, like you said earlier. We'll find out. On that topic, by the way, one thing I also wanted to ask you about before we let you go, I saw the news came out today that in Baltimore, they are not going to allow fans in the stands, at least at the beginning of the season. Here in Kansas City, they're going to try it. And obviously that's, people come down on both sides of the issue when it comes to whether or not they should. What's the reaction been like in Baltimore to that news at this point? And I guess that's something that they could decide to change sometime later in the season if things get better.
I talk a lot of politics on my show. I'm doing something called Baltimore Positive, and we're relaunching a brand next week here. And I appreciate all the people in Kansas City I've ever gotten mail from. And I've been out to your town. Your town's one of my favorite cities in the country. I say that not just because I'm on the air with you. I say that all the time, despite the fact that the Orioles got their ass kicked there a couple of years ago. But I've come out for football games, been going to Arrowhead, been going to Royal Stadium since George Brett. My parents took me out there in 1983. I got those pictures, believe it or not. But I have been politically aware of what the virus is from March, and I have never wavered. Blue hat, red hat, purple hat, pick your hat. The science doesn't care. And from the very beginning, we knew that bubbles, what the NBA has tried to do, what the NHL has tried to do, was going to be more successful than other things. The one thing that I do have a little bit of political problem with is that when you start saying we're going to try to let the fans in and you sort of know better, like all of these people that were shocked, like about 4 or 5 weeks ago, the Ravens announced that they were going to allow 12,000 people in, or going to try to, right? And people were like, oh. And I'm like, have you been like paying attention? I mean, did you really think you were going to the games? I mean, really? Like at what point in April and May and June, when you're still home wearing a mask 120 days into this, did you not realize that you might not be going to the game? But somehow, some way, the NFL kept sort of promising, and even in Kansas City, they're promising your fans right now, you might be able to come. I have never led the expectation or held the belief. And I attended a Ravens practice 24 hours ago at the stadium. 100 degrees out, nobody in the stadium. Weird, really, really weird. Like these baseball games, just weird all the way around. But if you're shocked that you can't go to the football game, you've not been thinking right the last 6 months. If this is shocking to you, So I was shocked 6 weeks ago when people were shocked that they weren't going to let 68,000 people in. And I'm like, well, I guess it depends on your political affiliation and your level of belief in what you're going to be able to get away with and what the virus is not going to allow you to get away with. So, I'll leave it at that and just say I'm shocked that stadiums think they're going to open in Kansas City and in other places, the SEC and the Deep South, and people have got one flag and the other flag. The virus doesn't care. It really doesn't. And, I hope we all wake up to that as a society here and realize that. And so I'm not shocked that we're not going. I never had an expectation we're going to go. I had the expectation this is a plague and we're not doing well. So, I have road trips booked to Houston and Indianapolis and Foxborough and Pittsburgh and Cleveland and Cincinnati, the usual suspects. I don't know if I'm going. And if I go, I don't know what the value of me flying off to Houston or even Kansas City at some point and sitting up at the roof in the middle of an empty parking lot watching them play football in an empty stadium for television. All of it, as a guy who's done sports for 30 years, all of it's very, very weird to me. And I don't know what baseball thinks they're doing. It reminds me of the Eddie Feigner All-Stars. It has no integrity as a season, as a championship, as something to give 3 hours of your time to every night. The baseball circumstance really worries me for what football could look like in November if 4 teams pop 30 tests, teams can't play, quarterbacks can't play, coaches get it, somebody gets it to his mother and his mother's sick in the hospital. There's just a lot of moving parts with football in doing this at every level. And, I'm skeptical. And I will remain skeptical that the Ravens and the Chiefs will be playing a playoff game the 3rd week of January and the winner's going to Tampa. I'll believe that when I see it from a virus standpoint.
Well, one thing that I'm with you on is fans of the stands, no fans in the stands. Will they play the season to its completion? I have learned through this virus not to take anything for granted. And so, my expectations are none. If they get to the season opener and I get to watch it, I'm going to enjoy watching it. And then I'm just going to.
But Nate, how vested do you want to be in a season they might not finish? That starting a book that they don't finish, that's an issue for me, and it's an issue for baseball, basketball, hockey, whatever. Playing hockey in the middle of August. I get it. They're making money, and that's. I've been talking about this for 30 years, and it's rah, 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 shish, boom, bah, and my town, and they love Baltimore, and they're doing it for old KC. No, they're doing it to turn a buck. And it's never been more apparent they don't really care about the health of the players, because if they did, they wouldn't play. So, because they don't need to play. I don't need them to play, and I make my living doing this. But needing them to play, giving me something to do Sunday at 1 o'clock, I guess so. Baseball's trying to do that at 7:30 every night, and it's felt, relatively hollow. It feels like I was okay watching Guy Fieri back in June. Making my own way. You know what I mean? I didn't need bad baseball in the middle of August on a short track with 7-inning games and, quad A pitching. I don't know that this has added any color to the middle of my pandemic experience. And I'm wondering what football in an empty stadium for 3 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 20 weeks. You have a parade, nobody comes. You play games, nobody can go to the games. You win, you have nobody to high five. You want to throw a party in your basement? You probably shouldn't, right? So all of that being said, I'm trying to gauge it for what it is, and to your point, not have expectations, but also expecting that the virus is coming. And what team it gets to, which offensive line gets it first, I don't know, but that's sort of baked into this, right? That at some point, somebody's offensive line is going to get sick and they're going to shut the whole building down, and the Chiefs won't be playing the Packers this week, right? Like, that's going to happen.
It certainly looms. I mean, it certainly looms. I can't sit here and deny that whatsoever. But as a guy that does 4 hours of talk radio a day, I'm glad we got some games to talk about. Hey, Nestor, hey, this is great stuff, man. I really appreciate the time as always, and we'll talk to you again real soon.
Appreciate you, man. Thanks. Take care, Kansas City. Get some barbecue for me.
I hope we get to see Chiefs and Ravens, and I hope we get to see it in the playoffs at some point, too. We'll keep our fingers crossed. That is Nestor Aparicio, and that's going to do it for us on this edition of NFL Live KC. We'll see you next time. Hey, man, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Did you make a video or just audio of that?
It's just I recorded the video, but we're just going to play the audio back.
Nice.
If you want to keep it, you can use it for
if you Dropbox the video, I'll put the video up.
Okay, cool.
Nasty at WNST.net. I'll throw you an email on it, all right?
Okay.
Because I couldn't record it because you originated the film.
Oh, I could have enabled your ability to record.
You could have,
sorry,
yeah,
man.
and I didn't ask, but you had just started, so it was no big deal.
Yeah. For whatever it's worth, man, I'm with you on all that.